Hello everybody. Today we're going to be installing our FASS Connect digital monitoring system with the FASS Connect gauge, the ECU, the single pressure sensor, and then we're going to be adding some additional sensors. We are going to have a secondary fuel pressure sensor that gives you the ability to monitor your fuel filter life in real time. We're also going to be adding a fuel temperature sensor, a boost pressure sensor, and exhaust gas temperature sensor. Now let's get this installation started. Now, your very first step, what you're going to want to do is come in, get a little bit of a closer look. You're going to want to locate your power source and where you're going to be mounting your FASS Connect. And as you can see here, there's a piece of Velcro where I previously had the FASS Connect mounted. We're going to stick it right on top of the TIPM or the fuse panel right here, as we're going to need a battery ground connection and a key on fused connection. So this is going to be the location where we will route our gauge wires to and our wires from the actual FASS Connect ECU right into this TIPM here. Now let's get started. Okay, now on my truck, I'm going to be using a gauge pod to mount the Connect gauge. So we will thread this back off, just like that. Feed our wires through, and then this will slide right into our gauge pod. Okay, so I have this suction cup gauge pod mount, just mounts right to the windshield here, and we're gonna go ahead and install our Connect gauge. Okay, now it is very optional, but I always like to put some wire loom over our wires here, so it just tucks the wires in and gives it a nice factory look. Now that we have our wire loomed on the 4th gen Ram application, I'm going to pull the weather stripping back, and I'm going to pop this panel off right here. Then I can route my wires through. And then these are going to route to a good pass-through location through the firewall. That way you can get through the firewall and to your power source. Okay, now pop my panel back in, pop my weather strip on. Make sure I like how those wires are routed. And then we can move on to running those wires through the firewall. Now on 1994 through 2018 Ram applications, for automatic transmission trucks, there's actually a block-off plate in the firewall where the master cylinder for the clutch would normally mount. And I absolutely love using that to run the wires through. It's plastic. You can drill a nice small hole in it, real easy with it installed, and then route those wires through. Now that is what I've done on my application here. So we're gonna go ahead and get those wires routed. Now on any other applications, just find a nice location to run those wires through the firewall. Sometimes you can use one of the existing grommets for an electrical harness. Just make sure that those wires are not rubbing up against the firewall itself on a sharp edge where it could rub through and short out. Okay, now that we have the wires routed through the firewall, go ahead and secure all of the wires under your dash. So that way as you're pulling slack out underneath the hood, you're not pulling these wires excessively tight, and you have them routed nice and neatly exactly how you want them. Now we have this fancy little loom installation tool that makes it nice and easy to slide that split loom right over your wires. I would highly recommend that for any shop. Okay, now that we have the wires for the Connect gauge routed up to our power source, let's go ahead and mount our ECU. Keep in mind, this is a pre-production ECU, so it won't be quite as pretty as the finalized product. Now, like I mentioned before, I already had Velcro applied to the back of my ECU and the top of my TIPM. So right where I want to mount it, go ahead and stick it there like it was meant to be. Okay, now that the ECU is mounted, we can get a measurement on the length that we will need to trim the power wire and the ground wire, which I have already trimmed those right to the exact perfect length. So the power source for the ECU itself, you will want to run your ground wire for the ECU in the gauge directly to the negative battery terminal, and you're going to want to run the power wire from the gauge and the ECU to a key on fuse and tie into that fuse with one of the supplied addafuses that we have in the kit. There will be a micro addafuse and a mini addafuse. And again, you'll want key on power. Now I'm going to connect our ground wires directly to our battery. Get our gauge wire, measure that, and then trim it to length. And we can get our wire strippers and strip off about 1/4 to 1/2 inch of the insulation from the wire. Now we can go ahead and crimp on one of these supplied ring terminals. Okay, now let's do the same thing for the ECU ground wire. Route that over to our negative terminal. Again, trim it to length, and then we can go ahead and strip off that insulation. Crimp our ring terminal on once again. Okay, let's get those connected to the negative terminal. Now we have our positive wires routed over to our TIP'em or fuse panel right here. I'm just going to peel our ECU out of the way and set it aside in a good location. Open our fuse panel, and then we're going to find a good key on power source. Okay, now remove that selected fuse. And this is a micro fuse, so we're going to grab our micro fuse addacircuit and show you how to install it into our panel. We have our 2 fuses and our addafuse right here. Now, there's going to be 2 different slots in this addacircuit. This top one here, you can see, is going to be going to our additional wire or for the circuit that we are adding. This one will get the fuse that we supply in our kit installed in this location. Then in the other fuse location, this is going to be for the OEM fuse that you removed from your fuse panel. Very simple, that's it. This is ready to be installed into our fuse panel. Stick that right into the location of the fuse that we removed. Okay, now we'll route both power wires into our fuse panel here and crimp them both into the same butt connector. Now that we have our wires routed, go ahead and trim both of those to length. Then we're going to remove about 1/2 inch of the insulation. Now go ahead and take both of those wires, put them together, and twist those wires together. Now we're not using wire nuts here by any means, but what we're doing is we're twisting them together, and that's going to make that much easier to install into our butt connector. And get that installed into our butt connector, and go ahead and crimp that connection. Give those a gentle pull. Make sure you have a good secure crimp. Okay, now we can route the wires into the TIP'em or fuse panel here and close our lid. Okay, and just as simple as that, we now have power to the ECU and the gauge. For this kit, we're going to be installing the single pressure sensor that comes with the FASS Connect kit. Now, when you're installing a single pressure sensor in the Titanium Signature Series and the Industrial Series system, that's just simply going to go right in that 1/8 inch NPT gauge port. So we'll remove this plug we're going to apply thread tape to our pressure sensor, thread it into the FASS, that G port here, and then tighten it. Very simple. Okay, grab your pressure sensor harness. This is going to connect right to that pressure sensor, and then you will route this harness along your frame rail and up to the FASS Connect ECU. Now that we have the harness routed up to the FASS Connect ECU, just remove the cap from one of the sensor plugs, and then there is a location indicator. You will line that up with the pigtail from the sensor harness. And then thread down the locking cap. And that's it. Now the single yellow wire and single green wire, these are both for relay outputs. So you can use the FASS Connect ECU and the FASS Connect app to trigger a relay for basically any accessory. Rock lights, if you have a light bar, if you had pod lights up front, FASS fuel heater. Again, pretty much any accessory you'd like, but you cannot have the full current of that accessory being drawn through the ECU. Again, these are just to trigger the relays. Since I'm not using these currently on my platform, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to loop these wires around and go ahead and put some electrical tape on there just to prevent these wires from touching anything. Now that we have the ECU installed, the gauge installed, and the pressure sensor installed, go ahead and nicely tie up all of your wires, all of your sensor cables to prevent them from rubbing on any moving parts, any hot exhaust parts, and just make them look nice and clean. Now we're going to be installing a second pressure sensor into the FASS system, which is going to give us the ability to monitor the filter life of our extreme water separator. And the way that it monitors the filter life is we have a pressure sensor here in the gauge port, which is after the fuel has passed through this XWS. The other sensor port we're going to be utilizing is this electric heater port right here. So this is where, with a bushing, you're going to install the secondary pressure sensor, and we measure the pressure drop or the fuel pressure as it passes through this filter, how much that pressure drops, and that the greater the pressure drop, the more that this filter is plugged. So ideally you want minimal pressure drop, as that is going to be with a new filter installed. So again, that second sensor is going to get installed right in this electric heater port. Now we're going to be moving on to installing a boost pressure sensor in this truck. We're going to apply our electrical tape, get a few rotations around that sensor, and now we need to select a location on the truck where we're going to place this sensor. Now, just like the other sensors, this is 1/8 inch NPT, and on this truck, it has an aftermarket intake horn on it that's already got those NPT ports drilled and tapped, so it makes it super simple. And again, every single application is going to be different. And these pressure sensors are good for up to 100 PSI. So for the majority of you street truck guys, that's going to be more than enough, but 1,000+ horsepower guys, if you're running more than 100 pounds of boost, that is where this sensor is going to max out. Now let's get that pressure sensor connected to our ECU. When you're installing an exhaust gas temperature sensor on your truck, you're going to want to find a location in the exhaust manifold that collects temperature from as many sensors as possible. So as close to the collector at the turbo, the better off you are. On this application, it has an exhaust manifold on it that's already drilled and tapped for 1/8 inch NPT and the optimal location. So that is where we put our sensor. As with other sensors, each application is going to be different. So many of the OEM exhaust manifolds, or all of the OEM exhaust manifolds, you'll need to drill and tap an 1/8 inch NPT port in that manifold, and then install our exhaust gas temperature sensor thermocouple. When installing a fuel temperature sensor, you'll install that sensor in this electric heater port that is facing directly out to the side of the truck, and that's going to measure the fuel temperature as it's coming into the FASS system. Now, if you guys have any questions on this install, don't hesitate to give our customer service team a call, and they'll be happy to help.